So as you're aware, at 6:55 yesterday morning, the 20th of February 2013, a fatality collision occurred in the southbound lanes of Sandstone Road at the intersection with Sandstone Hill. At that time, a 56-year-old female, Wong Shuk Yi, was crossing the road towards the bus stop on the opposite side of the road on the east side of the roadway. At that time, she was struck by a red Ford Taurus motor vehicle. She then fell to the road and was struck by a second vehicle. Both of those vehicles failed to stop at the scene and travelled southbound on Berkshire Boulevard. As a result of that collision, Mrs. Wong sustained fatal injuries and died at the scene. The two vehicles that made off, again, travelled southbound on Berkshire Boulevard. And approximately an hour later, we received a phone call from a man admitting to being the driver of the Ford Taurus, and he surrendered himself to police custody. That man, Stephen Jonathan Bernace, 24, of Calgary, Alberta, has been charged with hit and run causing fatality and is currently before the courts. At the moment, we are still looking for the driver and the second vehicle, which at the moment we're describing as a small, dark-coloured sedan, possibly a Grand Prix sort of size vehicle, and we are seeking the assistance from the public to assist us in finding that motor vehicle. Any questions?
Do you have indication whether it's speed or possibly distracted driving?
So at the moment we're looking at all possibilities that led to this collision. At this stage, we don't believe speed is an issue. However, we are still investigating, like I said. The possibility of distracted driving, we are investigating that at this time.
Can you talk a little bit about the time frame that you're looking at? I know in the press release that you sent out this morning, you mentioned that there were possibly two cars in between the ones that hit the woman that swerved away. How long of a time frame are we looking at here?
I think we're looking at a fairly short time frame, within several seconds. The information that we have at the moment is that the Ford Taurus struck her first. We've been led to believe that two motor vehicles then drove around the deceased while she was on the road before she was struck by the second vehicle.
Obviously, with it being that sort of a time frame, the reaction time for the following vehicles after that red Ford Taurus would probably, assumably, been quite small.
Yes.
For this person that you're still looking for, what are they looking at now from you? Obviously, they left the scene of a crime, but if they had stayed, what sort of, culpability would they have had in this incident?
It's difficult to say without having the full facts, which is why we want to speak to this person. If it's a situation where there's insufficient evidence to continue, so be it. If there is something that we need to deal with, then we will deal with it. Without speaking to them, we can only assume the worst. So that's why we need to speak to anybody who may have seen the collision, the drivers who drove around, the pedestrian when she was on the road, the driver of the vehicle that did make the secondary strike. We need to gather all this information so that we can go back to the Wong family and put their minds at rest.
How likely is it that the second vehicle that struck the woman didn't know that they had actually hit a human being?
Certainly possible, but again, without speaking to them directly, we don't know what they saw and what they thought. That's why we need to speak to them to find that out.
Could you speak to the first person who has now been charged? If they had stayed at the scene, what possible charges would they have faced, if any?
Good question. Until we can actually speak to the people directly, or the drivers directly, we don't know what charges may be appropriate. It could be that there may have been no charges in this collision had he remained at the scene. But without actually being able to speak to people at the time, we can only assume the worst. If they drive off, then we have to assume the worst and we charge accordingly. Had they stayed, and the information that was provided to us by direct witnesses and evidence at the time, we deal with it appropriately. And if there's no charges warranted, then so be it.
What legal obligation, if any, is there for people to stop at the scene? You mentioned the two vehicles that had continued to drive. Are they legally obligated to stop?
Yes, they are. Any person who's involved in any collision of any description is required under the Traffic Safety Act to remain at the scene and render assistance, supply their name, address, insurance details to whatever parties require that information. If there is knowledge that an injury has occurred, then under the criminal code you are required to remain at the scene.
So for those two drivers that drove around, are you still looking for them and safety cases?
Again, I'm not going to speculate on what charges may be appropriate to them until I speak to those people. I don't know what they saw. They might not have seen anything, but until I can speak to, or until I get the opportunity to speak to them to find out what their version of events are, I don't know what they saw, what they can think happened, or what they thought the object of the road might have been. So I need to speak to them. So I'm not going to speculate on charges first week until I know what they saw.
We saw a traffic stop, another traffic stop early this morning around 7 o'clock. Did anything come out of that at all? Any new leads in
We've had more witnesses who have provided us with more information, but we're still asking for more people to come forward.
Did this shake your faith in human nature, the way that you played out?
I'd like to say no. Again, it all comes down to a person's perception. If a person actually knows they've hit something, or they know that someone is dead on the side of the road, then yeah, I'm a bit shaken by people's callousness. However, do they know what they're seeing? Are they aware of what they're seeing? If they don't know that it's a person on the side of the road, can I condemn somebody for driving on? It's very hard to do that.
How did this woman actually get home? Who did stop? Who did call for help, and how long later was it?
My understanding is that shortly afterwards, after the collision, a vehicle did block the road, and I believe a local resident came out to assist her when she stormed the road.
Your understanding with the two vehicles that went around is that they must have seen something and physically moved around it. There's no chance that they drove past it without anything else.
My understanding is they actually had to maneuver around the deceased on the road. Now again, it's quite possible they didn't recognise Mrs. Rock as being a pedestrian. They might have thought it was some other object, a bumper or whatever. Again, I'm not going to condemn, I'm not going to condone. I need to speak to these people to find out exactly what they saw.
Can you describe the clothing the victim was wearing?
I believe she's wearing a dark jacket and a pair of jeans, but I really can't make a definite comment on that, I'm afraid. It was dark, but it was morning twilight, so street lighting was on.
Can you speak to that second vehicle again? I know at one point yesterday there was belief that it could be a brown, possibly Oldsmobile.
Yep.
Have you then changed that, given you information, or what kind of vehicle are we looking for now? Is there anything more besides?
Yeah, we've got one witness who is very confident about motor vehicles and what they are and everything else. The information regarding the brown Oldsmobile came from one witness who thought it was a brown Oldsmobile, which is why I put it out at that time. We then had a more detailed statement from one of the better description, our star witness, who was able to describe our first vehicle exactly. So I'm giving him a bit more credit in terms of what he could describe for the second vehicle. And we've actually had another couple of witnesses who have been able to support this small dark sedan type vehicle.
Just to be clear, was the woman using a crosswalk?
Again, that's why I need to speak to the witnesses. I really want more people to come forward. We're having difficulty placing her in the road at the moment. So I'm not going to say she was or wasn't in the crosswalk. I need to confirm that, and then we're going to get that is from witness evidence.
And I know that yesterday you were talking about how you guys are having problems reconstructing exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So are you guys basically just relying on witnesses right now, or were you guys able to figure things out?
We rely on everything we can gather, be it witness evidence, be it the vehicle itself, whatever we actually find at the collision scene. This particular dynamic is a little bit more interesting in terms of the interaction with the second vehicle. So it's making it slightly harder for us to work it out. That said, the vehicle that we seized yesterday, the red Ford Taurus, is providing us with a lot of information.
And how much damage was it to the vehicle?
A bit. And that's what I would say at the moment.
The driver who was crashed, can you say anything about where he was going, what he was doing?
My understanding is that he was going from home to work.
Is he cooperative?
Yes, he was. Yeah. Okay.
Do you think that the first time she was struck would have been lethal in and of itself, or is there a possibility that she know was going to the second time she was struck?
Yeah, again, that's a difficult question for me to answer. I'm not a medical doctor. She is going through the process of an autopsy at the moment. and I'm hoping that the autopsy might be able to assist us in being able to apportion, for want of a better description, blame to one driver or the other. In any event, both vehicles struck her. Both vehicles caused some injury to her, and that's what we're looking at the moment.
And the second vehicle, when it struck her, was she still on the ground? Had she gotten up? Did it actually run right over her?
Yeah, my understanding is that she was lying on the ground with the vehicle running over her.
The police officers stopping vehicles, the electronic sign, how rare is it to have sort of these lengths?
Yeah, this is the first time we've tried this. I'm from the United Kingdom originally, and we used to have these signs all over London for major incidents. And that's what I'm basically classing this as. It's a major incident, a major investigation. And this was the first time we thought we'd try this and see how it works for us. And so far it's been quite useful.
How many witnesses have you actually talked to that saw the crash itself, as opposed to, we've heard from a lot of people who saw the aftermath?
We've got a few. And again, I'm not going to speculate on the exact number because I'll probably be wrong. But we do have a number of people who have come forward and are able to speak to the actual collision at the time.
You mentioned distracted driving is one of the possibilities, or one thing that you're looking at. Would you call it a strong possibility, or just look at every possible outcome?
We look at every possible outcome that we may have through this collision. So we look at speed, we look at alcohol, we look at distraction, we look at the condition of the motor vehicle, we look at the driver, we look at the pedestrian. There are so many different factors that we look at. Distraction is just one of those avenues that we go down to see if it is a factor in a particular condition.
So is there any early evidence that it could be that, or?
It's just part of the investigation that we do.
Just sorry, also just related to the witnesses who saw the actual crash. You say a few of them. Did they all remain on scene, or did you find them through other means?
Yeah, we had some people who remained at scene, and we had some people we've had to track down during the course of the last 24, 36 hours or so. But there are still a few people out there who saw something, and again, I would appeal to anybody who has any information, please come forward, so that we can make a full and complete investigation into what happened yesterday.
One more thing, just apart from lack of decency of leaving a scene, the charge of hit and run must be substantially more than if the guy just stayed. I mean, what do you get, driving without care and attention, or vehicular?
Well, again, I mean, you've got everything from nothing in terms of charges, all the way up to what we charged the gentleman with yesterday, which is hit and run causing death.
Yeah.
So anything in between those two. Had he stayed, we may be looking at nothing for him.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the message for that is, if you're involved in the collision, remain at scene.
Just one more. Can you tell us anything about the victim you mentioned this morning? Is she going to work?
Yeah, my understanding is that Mrs. Wong was on her way to work.
She's in the house going to Sandstone.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.